Come on now, Mr. Reynolds. $75,000 is more than fair for someone in your position. That's Victoria's Sterling Blackwood trying to buy my silence with an insult. I just come back from the Veterans Hospital after losing my leg in Afghanistan, only to discover 127 high-end vacation lodges built right on my private Montana lake. Family land held since the 1920s, now smothered by diesel engine roar, fresh asphalt fumes, and non-stop construction noise. My water bill had jumped from $45 to $890 every month. Wealthy tourists drained my supply while I footed the cost. I'm Wade Garrison, disabled Navy veteran. She figured I'd grab the bribe. Big mistake. One single 1987 paper proved those absolute water rights belonged only to me. What I did next stayed 100% legal and collapsed her $12 million operation in a single day. Total devastation. Smash like if you'd spit on her offer and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Just wait until the sheriff rolls up. Let me lay out the whole story of how this nightmare began. My name is Wade Garrison, and I put in 20 years with the Navy Construction Battalion. That's the engineering outfit that constructs everything from airstrips to bridges right under enemy fire. After losing my leg in Afghanistan, I took my disability pension plus every dollar I had saved and purchased this lakeside parcel in 2015. 40 acres of untouched wilderness holding a spring-fed lake that had stayed in the same family since the 1920s. This wasn't ordinary real estate for me. After months of operations and learning to walk again, that lake turned into my lifeline. The gentle sound of waves against the shore became the only thing that calmed the nightmares. I would sit on my dock at dawn, coffee mug in hand, watching eagles dive for fish while mist lifted off the surface. My 16-year-old daughter, Emma, used to visit every summer before the divorce. I taught her how to cast a fly rod from that exact same dock. The plan stayed simple. Live quietly on my disability check. Maybe launch a small fishing guide business for fellow veterans battling PTSD. This lake would become Emma's inheritance, a slice of family history she could hand down to her own children. Then I crossed paths with Victoria Sterling Blackwood. Victoria is 54 years old and runs Lakeside Luxury Rentals, a firm she took over from her father, who had received it from his own father. Picture the most entitled woman you have ever met, then triple it across 3 generations who never once heard the word no. She drives a spotless white Range Rover that has never left pavement and shows up at job sites in tailored business suits. Victoria carries that special kind of arrogance born from believing cash fixes any problem, and ordinary folks should feel thankful for table scraps. While I spent 6 months inside the VA hospital handling prosthetic complications, Victoria's crews worked nonstop. They erected 127 luxury vacation lodges around what had once been my tranquil lake. Each unit rented for $400 nightly in high season, and every single one pulled water straight from my private well network. Here is what truly infuriates me. Victoria's whole business plan relied on taking my water without permission. She knew I was disabled, living alone, and fighting medical battles. She assumed I would stay too weak, too broke, or too exhausted to push back. In her eyes, I looked like the ideal target, a wounded veteran who would simply accept whatever leftovers she tossed my way. The smell of diesel exhaust and concrete dust had replaced the fresh mountain breeze. The roar of jet skis and loud tourists had silenced the early morning birds. Trash now drifted across water that once stayed crystal clear. My peaceful refuge had turned into party central, and I paid the electric bill that kept the pumps running for everyone. But Victoria never counted on one thing. 20 years of military duty teaches you that when war is declared, you never surrender. You begin drafting your counterstrike. And as a Navy engineer, I understood water systems better than she ever could. The first time I met Victoria in person, she stepped out of that white Range Rover wearing $800 hiking boots that had never touched real dirt. She carried a fancy water bottle while standing beside the lake she had polluted for months. The irony hung so heavy you could slice it. She sized me up, noted the prosthetic leg and faded military clothes, and I watched her mentally calculate the smallest amount needed to make me vanish. What she saw was a disabled veteran on fixed income. What she missed was a man who had solved impossible engineering challenges under fire for 2 decades. That became her opening error, but far from her last. 3 days after I returned home, Victoria's attorney arrived at my door holding a cease and desist notice. When I say attorney, I mean this fellow climbed from a BMW in a $3,000 suit to deliver legal papers to a disabled veteran inside a modest cabin. His cologne probably cost more than my entire monthly check. The notice claimed I interfered with lawful business by limiting water to the rental project. According to her legal team, I somehow violated their rights simply by living on my own land. The nerve of these people stunned me. But the situation turned personal fast. My monthly water bill had soared from $45 to $890. The well pump that once ran twice daily now operated nonstop, straining like it supplied an entire town. My water pressure fell so low I had to pick between hot water and decent flow when showering. I could not enjoy both. Meanwhile, Victoria charged guests $400 per night per lodge. Do the math. 127 units at full capacity pulled in more than $50,000 nightly using my water while I covered the pump electricity. The chlorine taste in my well water signaled deeper trouble. The lodges demanded so much that the water table dropped, concentrating minerals and chemicals that had never caused issues before. The lake that once sparkled now carried a slick of sunscreen and boat fuel on top. I chose to fight back the smart way any solid engineer would, with thorough research. I drove my old pickup to the county courthouse, walked past Victoria's white Range Rover in the guest spot, and spent 3 full days searching property records. The dusty scent of old ledgers and the scrape of pen on official pages fill my days. What I uncovered in those archives would have made Victoria's expensive heels move much quicker if she had known. I pulled every deed, every easement, and every water rights record stretching back to the 1920s. I matched old survey maps against current satellite images. I even located the original homestead papers from my great-grandfather. That is when I found something that chilled my blood and quickened my pulse together. No water easements existed anywhere. None. Zero. Victoria had constructed her entire 127-lodge empire, assuming she could simply take my water. Every legal file I examined confirmed the identical fact. The water rights for that lake and the underground springs feeding it belonged solely to my parcel. Victoria's project held exactly as much legal claim to my water as I held to the gasoline in her Range Rover tank. I sat in that courthouse basement surrounded by century-old boxes and realized Victoria had placed a massive gamble. She had risked $12 million in building costs, betting that a disabled veteran lacked the knowledge, money, or courage to resist. She had built it first and planned to fix legal issues later, probably by tossing me a cheap buyout that would let her claim my family's water rights for almost nothing. The deeper I searched, the clearer it grew. Victoria had not made a simple oversight. This was intentional. She had spotted a chance to take advantage of someone she viewed as weak and seized it without hesitation. In her mind, I probably seemed like another injured veteran who would happily accept crumbs instead of battling someone with endless resources. But Victoria had misjudged badly. 20 years in the Navy teaches more than engineering. It teaches patience, strategy, and calm under stress. It teaches that every conflict contains several stages, and the side holding superior information usually wins. I left that courthouse carrying a folder of copied documents and a strategy already taking shape. Victoria believed she held every advantage because of money and attorneys. What she failed to see was that I held the single card that beat everything else: lawful ownership of the water her entire business required. The battle had begun, and Victoria Sterling Blackwood had no clue what was approaching. 2 weeks later, Victoria switched to the carrot. She drove up to my cabin in that spotless white Range Rover, stepped out wearing designer jeans and a cashmere sweater that cost more than my groceries for half a year. The gravel crunch under her boots sounded different, as if even the stones should feel honored. "Mr. Garrison," she said with a smile that must have required thousands in dental work, "I believe we have a misunderstanding. I want to extend an offer that fixes everything for both of us. She handed me a check already made out for $75,000. This more than covers any trouble, she added, like she performed a great kindness. Just sign this water access paper and we can forget the whole mess. $75,000 for water rights that produced millions in rental income. I stared at that check and felt a rage I had not known since combat. Not hot anger that causes mistakes, but cold focus that makes a person extremely dangerous. Let me get this straight, I replied calmly. You earn roughly $50,000 nightly at peak times using my water, and you propose to purchase permanent rights for $75,000 total? Victoria's smile wavered briefly. Well, when you phrase it that way, it does sound like you think I'm a fool. I finished. Ma'am, I may have lost a leg, but my mind works perfectly. That moment her polite mask vanished. Let's be reasonable, Mr. Garrison, she said, condescending thick in every syllable. $75,000 is generous for a man in your situation. You live on disability. You cannot work, and court fights cost money. This deal lets you leave with more cash than you have probably ever seen. My situation. She reduced 20 years of service, multiple deployments, and a Purple Heart to my situation, as if an IED injury made me unworthy of simple respect. I returned the check without glancing at the amount. I declined. The air around Victoria cooled 20 degrees. You are making a serious error, Mr. Garrison. I have resources beyond your imagination. I can stretch this out for years. I can drown you in lawyer bills until you lose everything. Maybe, I answered, but consider this. I have unlimited time, and you own a business that dies the instant I stop the water. After she drove away, I placed one call that altered everything. I reached Jake Morrison, a veterans' rights lawyer who partnered with VA Legal Aid. Jake had served as a Marine and focused on cases where disabled veterans faced exploitation by companies or wealthy individuals who assumed they could take advantage. Wade, he said once I described the details, this goes beyond theft. It is deliberate exploitation of a disabled veteran. We're going to enjoy this one. Jake performed his own checks, and what he discovered made Victoria's water theft appear even worse. Not only had she skipped water rights entirely, she had never requested the commercial water permits required for a project that size. State rules state any business using more than 10,000 gallons daily needs special approvals and environmental reviews. Victoria's lodges consumed over 100,000 gallons each day. I learned a key lesson from my military engineering days. Water permits work like building permits. Without them, every structure becomes illegal. And just like an unpermitted house can be condemned, a business running without water permits can be closed immediately by state officials. Jake explained it plainly. When you construct an enterprise that depends on a resource you do not legally own, you are building on quicksand. It appears stable until someone yanks the base away. Victoria had borrowed $12 million to fund construction. Loan payments alone likely ran 6 figures monthly. Her cash flow required those lodges to stay full at premium prices. Every drop making that possible came from a disabled veteran she expected to stay too damaged to resist. But I was not damaged. I had only begun. Victoria's next step arrived exactly 2 weeks later and aimed to inflict pain. I woke to orange traffic cones sealing my driveway and a fresh sign reading private property, no trespassing, lakeside luxury residents only. My own driveway had been claimed off limits. When I drove around to check, I found her crew had installed a chain-link gate across the only road linking my land to the highway. 3 men in matching polo shirts labeled Lakeside Luxury Protection stood trying to appear tough. They carried that fake authority from wearing uniform shirts and holding clipboards. The fresh concrete smell told me this stayed permanent. They had poured new bases for the gate posts and used professional hardware. This was meant to trap me on my own land like a prisoner. Sorry, sir, one guard said when I pulled up in my truck. This is private development property, residents, and approved guests only. I live here, I answered, pointing at my cabin visible through the trees. Not according to our maps, he replied, showing a laminated sheet that colored my property as part of the rental project. You will need another route. alternate access to my own land, the parcel my great-grandfather homesteaded and my family had owned for nearly a century. The boldness stunned me, even for Victoria. But here Victoria committed a major tactical blunder. She had tried to imprison a man who spent 20 years solving supply problems under pressure. The first lesson any military engineer learns is that every position offers multiple entry points. You simply think creatively. I drove home and phoned Jake Morrison. They blocked my legal road. I told him, I am trapped on my own land. That is kidnapping. Jake responded at once. And it becomes a federal crime when done against a disabled veteran. I am filing an emergency injunction today. While Jake handled the legal side, I began recording everything. I photographed the illegal gate, taped conversations with the guards, and used my phone to map the barriers precisely. 20 years of service teaches that evidence wins fights as often as force. The next morning brought something useful. A county surveyor's truck stopped near the gate. Jake's emergency order had prompted a court-required survey to fix exact boundaries. The experienced surveyor Bob Monroe, a 20-year county worker who respected property lines, told me it would take most of the day, but we would settle it. I gave him coffee and observed him work with GPS tools and old survey markers. As hours passed, Bob's face grew puzzled. "Mr. Garrison," he said at lunch, "I need to show you this." He guided me to survey stakes along the line between my land and Victoria's project. The stakes revealed a story that dropped my jaw. 12 of Victoria's luxury lodges sat 40 to 60 feet inside my property. Not only had she stolen my water, she had taken my land too. According to your deed, Bob explained, your boundary cuts straight through the middle of those cabins. They are not simply trespassing. They built permanent structures on land they do not own. I stood staring at 12 lodges worth roughly $2 million in construction costs sitting illegally on my ground. And I felt a piece snap into place. Victoria had not made one error. She had made dozens. Every cost-saving shortcut created another legal weakness. Bob kept surveying while I updated Jake. 12 cabins, Jake said, and I heard the smile. Wait, this is no longer theft. This is criminal trespass, illegal building, and fraud. Victoria is about to learn what happens when you challenge a veteran who fights back. That evening, I sat on my dock watching sunset over the lake she called private development property. Jet ski noise and loud guests could not erase the satisfaction of knowing Victoria's whole empire rested on lies, theft, and unlawful construction. She had tried to isolate me, scare me, and force surrender. Instead, she gave me enough proof to wreck everything she built. The conflict grew, and Victoria's Sterling Blackwood would soon see that some veterans refused to break. They simply became more dangerous. The breakthrough arrived from the least expected spot, my late Uncle Frank's basement. Emma visited for spring break, and we decided to sort his old house, which I had inherited along with the lakeland. Frank kept every record in neatly labeled boxes as family historian. "Dad, check this," Emma said, lifting a folder labeled Lake Water Agreement 1987. Inside lay the original water-sharing contract between my family and the prior ranch owner who needed lake access for cattle. As I read the faded pages, my hands trembled. The contract stated clearly, temporary water access for farming use only, renewable every 5 years by mutual agreement. The final renewal dated June 15, 1990, expired June 15, 1995. The deal had ended more than 25 years before Victoria began building. But that was not the shock. At the folder bottom, Emma discovered printed emails from 2018 bearing Sterling Blackwood development headers. The messages ran between Victoria and her legal staff discussing water issues before construction started. I read them twice before the meeting hit. From Victoria's attorney, client should know water access agreement expired in 1995. Current owner Garrison holds exclusive rights. Recommend obtaining new easement prior to building. Victoria's reply, proceed with construction. Can handle Garrison later if he causes trouble. Disabled veterans living alone probably will not fight. Handle Garrison later. Like I was an insect to remove instead of a person with rights. Another message from her project manager. Soil tests indicate water tables falling fast. Current demand exceeds safe levels. Suggest fewer cabins or new water sources. Victoria answered, cabin numbers stay the same. We will handle the water issue later. Garrison is disabled and on government aid. He will not hire lawyers. She had known. Victoria knew from the beginning she stole my water, built on my land, and broke multiple environmental rules. This was not an accident or legal gray area. This was planned theft supported by her belief I stayed too poor, too injured, or too afraid to resist. The email showed even more damage. Victoria had borrowed $12 million from the Sterling Family Trust. Loan papers included in the chain proved the whole project depended on future rental income. If lodges could not operate, she could not pay. If she could not pay, she risked losing the family company her grandfather started. Emma glanced up. Dad, she risked everything thinking you were too weak. Yeah, I said with a cold smile. Terrible gamble. I called Jake Morrison and read key parts of the emails. Wade, he said after silence, this is not evidence. It is a smoking gun. Victoria did not just steal water. She committed deliberate fraud and wrote it down. Power had flipped entirely. Victoria thought money and lawyers gave her control. She never realized she played poker while I studied chess. And in chess, the game ends only when the king falls. Victoria's Sterling Blackwood would soon see a checkmate. After those emails, I treated this like any military mission. Detailed planning, clear goals, and full force at the perfect instant. First, I built the physical system I needed to control events. Using Navy engineering skills, I designed and installed a main shut-off valve network at the wellhead where all water entered Victoria's project. This was no simple switch. I created a backup system with manual and remote valves, flow meters to record exact usage, and cameras to capture everything. Pipe sealant smell and wrench sounds became my daily rhythm while I worked inside the pump house my grandfather built in the 1940s. Every joint had to stay flawless, every link documented, every part legally solid. When finished, I could stop water to all 127 lodges with one turn and prove exactly when and why. The legal plan was formed with Jake's help. We filed a formal claim with the Montana State Water Board seeking $340,000 in past usage fees at commercial rates. We worked with county code enforcement on building violations. We prepared a federal lawsuit for land theft, disability discrimination, and emotional distress. The numbers were stunned. Each lodge used about 850 gallons daily when full. At Montana commercial rates, that equaled roughly $3 per day per lodge. Times 127 lodges over 3 years meant Victoria owed about $127,000 monthly in unpaid fees. But true power came from her finances. The email showed she paid $48,000 monthly in loan payments to the family trust. Her cash flow needed peak summer occupancy. If I stopped water on July 4th weekend, the biggest money weekend, she faced instant collapse. Building support mattered. Jake linked me with Commissioner Sarah Monroe from the County Water Authority, a tough former engineer who hated water theft. David Ramirez, an investigative reporter tracking vacation rental corruption, joined. Tom Fletcher, my closest neighbor facing his own pressure drops, volunteered once he learned the truth. Timing stayed surgical. July 4th weekend meant every lodge booked at $400 nightly. Victoria would collect over $50,000 daily with guests arriving Friday afternoon expecting luxury. Shutting water at 2 p.m. Friday created maximum chaos with maximum witnesses. I explained the mechanics to everyone. When you own the source, you own everything below. Like controlling the only gas station on a long desert highway. Everyone relies on you, but realizes it only when you lock the doors. Mental preparation counted too. I drove to Seattle, spent the weekend with Emma, and explained I fought for her inheritance, the family land and water that belonged to her. She understood at once. Dad, my great-grandpa did not homestead, so some rich woman could steal it from his great-granddaughter. Do what you must. At home, I practiced valve drills, timed pressure drops across the development, tested cameras, checked audio, and verified every part under stress. The final element was press coordination. David Ramirez placed news crews at key spots. Commissioner Monroe kept inspectors ready with citations. Jake held legal papers for the moment Victoria claimed I acted illegally. Victoria had spent 3 years convinced cash and threats could steal anything from a disabled veteran. She calculated I stayed too broke to fight, too alone to get help, and too damaged to last. She would learn how Navy engineers build things and also know precisely how to dismantle them. When someone attacks your family legacy, you do not retreat. You plan, prepare, and strike with everything. July 4th weekend stayed 8 weeks away. Victoria Sterling Blackwood had no idea she faced the fight of her life. Victoria's panic appeared in June. With my complaints gaining ground and news stories spreading, she escalated from harassment to open bribery. But she lacked subtlety. Jerry Kowalski, the county water inspector, arrived Tuesday morning with an official clipboard and uneasy look. Jerry had always been honest with me, so what followed shocked me. "Wade," he said, avoiding my eyes, "I have concerns about your well water quality. We receive reports it may be contaminated and unsafe." Bureaucratic smell filled the air. "Reports from whom?" I asked. Jerry shifted. "Anonymous tip to the health department. Claims your well causes stomach issues among rental guests." I had drunk that water for 8 years, and Emma swam in the lake every summer. If contamination existed, we would have noticed first. This was Victoria using county power to condemn my land and push me into care. "Jerry," I said, I know my water beats city supplies, but if testing is needed, let us do it right." I gave him a card for Mountain West Environmental Testing, an EPA-certified lab in Billings. Independent testing. If contamination shows, we find it. If not, we prove it. Jerry looked ready to disappear. "Well, the county usually uses our own lab." "The county lab run by Victoria's cousin?" I asked. Jerry's face confirmed it. "Yeah, independent lab it is." 3 days later, I held full test results proving my well water beat EPA standards in every measure, cleaner than most Montana city supplies. Jerry had to approve the well is safe. But I had recorded every meeting, and my cameras caught something useful the day Jerry visited. After leaving my property, he drove straight to the Lakeside Luxury Rental office. Victoria's white Range Rover sat outside. Through binoculars, I watched Jerry enter carrying a manila envelope. He left 20 minutes later without it, but with a white business envelope in his jacket. Victoria walked him to his car, shaking hands like they closed the deal. My system uses motion cameras with audio. When I reviewed afternoon footage, I captured what made Jake nearly celebrate. Clear video of Victoria handing Jerry a white envelope while saying, "This covers that water issue. Make sure the old cripple's well gets declared unsafe." She had reduced 20 years of service and a Purple Heart to old cripple. More importantly, she committed felony bribery on camera, plus discriminatory remarks about my disability. Jake contacted the FBI office in Billings immediately. Bribery of a county official is federal, and targeting a disabled veteran adds civil rights charges. Within 48 hours, Special Agent Martinez sat in my living room watching the recording. "Mr. Garrison," he said after 2 viewings, "this is textbook bribery. We are opening a federal investigation into MS. Sterling Blackwood's practices." The story ran in David Ramirez's paper. 3 days later headlined, "Luxury Developer Bribes Official to Target Disabled Veteran." It quoted the footage and detailed Victoria's harassment pattern against a Purple Heart holder. Social media exploded. Veterans' rights topics trended. Advocacy groups shared the story. Victoria's company Facebook page filled with angry veteran comments. Her polished image as a legitimate businesswoman crumbled live. But Victoria doubled down. She hired crisis experts and told everyone I was a troubled veteran trying to extort successful people. She claimed the bribery video was misunderstood and her disabled veteran comments taken out of context. The Sterling Family Trust Board, including her father, called an emergency meeting over the federal probe. Company stock fell as investors feared liability and bad press. Yet Victoria kept airing. Her next action proved so reckless, it handed me everything needed to finish her. Victoria's last desperate move happened the final week of June, days before my plan shut off. She realized legal pressure, bribes, and PR would not save her, so she turned physical. I woke at 0530, an old military habit, to my truck engine. Through the window, I saw two figures in dark clothes in my pickup. By the time I fastened my prosthetic and reached outside, they had vanished. But the damage was obvious. All four tires slashed deeply with a box cutter. Phone line cut in 3 places on overhead poles. Mailbox smashed with what looked like a bat. The message stayed clear. Stop fighting or worse follows. But Victoria erred badly. She moved from white-collar crime to physical threats against a disabled veteran while my full security coverage recorded everything. Motion cameras caught 2 masked men at 0347 approaching my truck. One slashed tires, the other watched. The same men used bolt cutters on my phone line. Most important, footage of them walking to a black SUV on the main road, a black SUV with custom chrome wheels belonging to Victoria's private security firm. I called Sheriff Martinez at once. Within 2 hours, deputies photographed damage and reviewed footage. Sheriff Martinez, a 20-year veteran himself, felt no amusement at threats against a disabled serviceman. Wade, he said after evidence review, this is not vandalism. This is criminal intimidation, possibly with federal hate crime upgrades. They chose the wrong veteran. But Victoria continued. That afternoon, while I filed reports at the sheriff's office, 3 men in lakeside luxury security shirts arrived at my property. My cameras recorded them circling the cabin, looking through windows, and discussing surveillance or worse. Next time you won't be lucky, one said straight into the camera, unaware of audio. Boss lady wants this problem gone permanently. When I returned and saw the footage, I felt combat-level certainty that someone planned serious harm. These were not idle threats. This was organized intimidation meant to drive me off my land forever. I phoned Jake Morrison and Sheriff Martinez together. Jake filed for emergency federal protection under disability statutes at once. This crossed into domestic terrorism. Sheriff Martinez posted a deputy at my property until resolution. Nobody threatens veterans in my county. The next morning brought the turning point. Victoria's security team held outstanding warrants. The man who threatened me on camera was wanted in 3 states for assault and extortion. Another had armed robbery convictions in California. Victoria had not hired security. She hired convicted criminals to intimidate a disabled veteran. Federal agents moved fast. FBI warrants covered Victoria's phones, business records, and accounts. They found a pattern of illegal intimidation against anyone challenging her. I was not her first target, only the first with enough proof. David Ramirez's follow-up article ran, "Developers hire criminals to threaten disabled veterans." It showed damaged photos and footage quotes. Veterans groups organized boycotts of her company and linked businesses. But the biggest explosion came from the IRS probe the FBI started. Victoria's rental operation had underreported income for years, dodging roughly $180,000 in occupancy taxes. State revenue seized accounts and launched full audits of all Sterling Blackwood companies. Victoria's empire collapsed from every side: federal bribery, tax evasion, criminal threats, disability violations. Her own board suspended her pending investigations. But I still held one final card. July 4th weekend remained 48 hours away, and Victoria still had no idea I would cut water to her entire operation on its most profitable weekend. 20 years of Navy duty taught me patience. Let the opponent err, then strike when least expected. Victoria's Sterling Blackwood would soon learn total defeat. July 4th weekend arrived with clear skies and temperatures climbing to 95 degrees. Perfect conditions for Victoria's biggest money weekend. All 127 lodges booked at peak rates. Families arriving Friday afternoon expecting luxury. I sat in a lawn chair beside the master valve at 1:45 p.m., wearing my full dress uniform with purple heart and ribbons. The symbolism stayed deliberate. A disabled veteran defending his rights against someone who called him worthless. David Ramirez positioned news crews. Commissioner Monroe had inspectors ready. Jake Morrison waited near the office with federal papers. Sheriff Martinez kept deputies for crowd control. At exactly 2 p.m., cameras rolling and witnesses present, I turned the master valve clockwise until it locked. The effect hit instantly. Water pressure vanished across the development in under 3 minutes. Families who had just checked into luxury lodges expecting hot showers and working toilets now stood in expensive shells with no water. Children cried over unusable bathrooms. Elderly guests worried about dehydration in 95-degree heat. By 2:15 p.m., confused families streamed to the rental office demanding answers. By 2:30 p.m., more than 300 angry guests who paid premium prices crowded the area. Sunscreen smell mixed with rising frustration as people realized their holiday weekend was ruined. Victoria emerged at 2:45 p.m. in a white designer suit and heels unsuited for the crisis. She tried calm while telling hostile families the outage stayed temporary and would be fixed. But when she spotted me, calmly seated by the valve, surrounded by cameras and officials, her control broke. She marched across gravel in designer heels, face flushed with rage and embarrassment. "This is illegal," she screamed loud enough for every microphone. "You cannot shut off our water. This is sabotage." I rose slowly using my cane for balance and faced the cameras directly. "Actually, ma'am, I can. It is my water. Always has been. Here is proof you stole it for 3 years." I passed the thick folder to David Ramirez, who photographed the water rights documents, expired easements, and Victoria's own emails admitting she knew everything was illegal. "This man is destroying our business," Victoria continued, unaware of every word recorded for evening news. "He is a crazy veteran trying to extort legitimate people." Commissioner Monroe stepped forward with citations. MS. Sterling Blackwood, you are served for unauthorized commercial water use, exceeding limits, and operating without environmental permits. All rental operations stop immediately. Sheriff Martinez delivered another set. You are also served with a federal warrant for bribery and intimidation of a disabled veteran. You have the right to remain silent. The tourist crowd turned uglier, realizing their weekend was lost. Families demanded refunds for false advertising. Some threatened lawsuits. Others simply packed cars to find working hotels. Victoria's polished image shattered on live television. Her white suit was stained with sweat and dirt. Heels broken on gravel. Voice shrill with panic. "You cannot do this to me," she screamed to the cameras. "I built this company. I employ people. This crazy veteran is ruining everything." I waited, then spoke into the microphone David held. "Ma'am, 3 years ago you decided a disabled veteran would be easy to rob. You thought I was too broken to resist. You were wrong." The crowd dispersed as word spread water would not return. Families loaded cars and left for other lodging. Victoria's most profitable weekend became a total disaster, broadcast live and shared across social media. By sunset, the development stood nearly empty. Her luxury empire was shut down in one afternoon by a disabled veteran with a wrench and legal right to use it. Justice arrived, and it tasted exactly like victory. The immediate results moved fast and final. Victoria's company refunded over $200,000 to guests whose holiday was destroyed. State investigators closed all rentals until proper water rights were obtained. The Sterling Family Trust Board removed Victoria and began salvage efforts for the family business. Within 30 days, Victoria accepted a settlement impossible 6 months earlier. She paid me $425,000 in backwater fees for 3 years of theft at commercial rates. She covered all legal costs, totaling another $150,000. Most importantly, a federal court order locked my exclusive water rights forever, so any future project needed my written approval and market rate monthly payments. Criminal penalties felt even sweeter. Victoria pleaded guilty to federal bribery and received 3 years in prison plus 2 years supervised release. Disability rights violations added another year. Jerry Kowalski, the inspector she bribed, lost his job and pension, and served 18 months for his part. But the true win went beyond money or court. It stayed personal and community-wide. I used $200,000 from the settlement to start the Montana Veterans Housing Assistance Fund, helping disabled veterans avoid homelessness when VA checks fall short. Jake Morrison helped launch the Veterans Water Rights Legal Clinic, offering free help to rural veterans facing similar exploitation. The lake recovered fast once the lodges closed. Water quality returned to pristine within 6 months. Eagles and osprey returned to fish in clean water free of fuel and sunscreen. Morning mist over calm water became my daily calm again. Emma moved home from Seattle that fall to help launch Warriors Fishing Guide Service. We provide therapeutic fishing trips for combat veterans with PTSD, using the peaceful lake for healing. The sound of respectful fishing lines replaced jet skis and loud parties. Our first guest was Tom Fletcher's nephew, a Marine who lost both legs to an IED in Iraq. Watching him catch his first rainbow trout from my dock, seeing peace return to his face as mist rose, I knew we created something bigger than cash. Victoria's downfall became a warning across the development world. She lost everything: the family company, personal assets, and freedom. Her father publicly disowned her for destroying the legacy through greed and illegal moves. The Sterling Blackwood name, once respected in Montana real estate for 3 generations, now meant corruption and exploitation. Broader effects surprised me. A new law protecting rural owners from development abuse passed the Montana legislature unanimously. The bill especially shields disabled veterans and low-income landowners from intimidation by big developers. Annual Veterans Lake Day now raises over $100,000 yearly for disabled veteran housing. Families travel from across Montana to fish, share stories, and support those who sacrifice for freedom. The Lake Victoria tried to steal became a symbol of standing against those who prey on the vulnerable. Every sunrise, I still sit on my dock with coffee, watching eagles fish in clear water. The prosthetic leg reminds me daily of service cost. But the peaceful lake reminds me daily of what service defends: the right to live with dignity on land your family earned. Victoria Sterling Blackwood learned the hard way that some veterans do not shatter when pushed. Sometimes they only grow more dangerous. And when you attempt to steal from someone who already gave everything for their country, you had better prepare to lose everything you own.